All right, you get stuck with me one more time. This time, I have the pleasure of sharing the stage with Ian Andes from 4eyes. And the background on this session, Fitpicks, which products get to market and why, really came out of this past summer at the Digital Health Summit. One of the most popular sessions was a discussion between the venture capitalist Lisa Suennen, she's also a blogger in the space, and Don Jones from Qualcomm Life. And they were talking to all of the challenges and opportunities in the digital health space. And one of the themes that they kept on coming back to was the lack of sales and marketing and distribution emphasis in our discussions about digital health and fitness. In fact, Lisa had this really great comment that she said that sales and marketing tend to get left out of the tech story when people are talking about these new products. And so we really wanted to have a session focused on how do you actually bring a product to market? It's one thing to have the great technology, but how are you actually making sure that people know about it, want it, and then ultimately will buy it? And so we had to look no further than Ian, who has been very successful with this company, 4eyes, and we wanted him to share with us some of his lessons learned and his process and his story of bringing his product to market. So before we get into that, Ian, why don't you just tell us a little bit about 4eyes, what it is, what your product is, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. All right. So the quick story, which doesn't put a good light on me very much. I'm an Ironman. I love training. I've been a competitive athlete my entire life. And I was out on a run, and I was so intent looking at my watch, and we were talking about data in the previous discussion, right? I was busy patting myself on the back. I finally broke 7-minute miles, missed the tree stump in front of me, and I fell on my face. And it really started the discussion of, okay, we're getting to the point where there's so much great technology and so much great data out there. How do we simplify that for the athletes? And we'll probably talk about this a little more later. And we started looking at technology and what we wanted to do and how we wanted to do it. And it was critical for me that we develop a product that can give the athlete the data while allowing them to stay safe by maintaining their focus on the road, right? So we have a heads-up display device that sits right under the eye. And we did it all through color and in the secondary vision. So it's one of those things, what do you learn as a kid? Red's bad, green's good, yellow's in between. So you can program things like heart rate, speed, cadence, pace, on a bike if you're familiar with power meters, et cetera, what kind of power you're outputting. So on our protocol, et cetera, we've got all the Ant Plus devices, display it to the unit, it'll take all your data, and it'll also talk to you. So I've got mine kind of set up where it's like, okay, you're running a little too fast to hit your goals, it's going to start going into the red. I'm not working out hard enough. It's going to go into the opposite colors, fully programmable, et cetera.
Right.
And it talks to me as well.
Cool. And these are your products here, right?
Yeah. I wasn't sure. So I got some stuff where we got the heart rate strap, et cetera. We've got a unit that fits on virtually any pair of sunglasses. There's multiple attachment points. And it really does sit right in your secondary vision, just below your eye.
So it's kind of like the Mission Impossible kind of where you're looking up, but you're actually seeing stuff in front of you. No.
So it's a really good question.
Okay, all right.
Basically, we went through that.
Okay.
And in our opinion, it's a bit of a dangerous model. So where I get really concerned with devices for what we're doing that have alphanumeric data, you've still got to defocus from the road in front of you to be able to look at that data. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of talk of the Google goggles and the Apple and what they're going to do, et cetera. For me, price point's a limiting factor. I wouldn't want, as an athlete, my glasses that are $1,500 just lying around type thing, right?
Right.
So we wanted to make sure that we were at a very cost-effective price point. So one of the mission-critical statements for us, it's got to be under $200. And the way that we display the data, again, is just color and the secondary vision. You never have to take your eyes off the road to be able to see your data. And you'll get all that through a series of blinking lights and color codes that you pre-program yourself because it's fully customizable.
Okay, all right. Thanks for setting me straight there.
No problem.
Okay, so I wanted to share with you all some data about tech startups. Christian Knopf from Blackstone Technology, he's an analyst with Blackstone Technology, he works in the M&A division, estimates that there were nearly 1 million tech startups in the US alone back in 2010, which is the most recent data. And at the same time, a lecturer at Harvard Business School, Shikhar Ghosh, recently released research that shows that about 3 out of 4 new venture-backed startups fail. So if you're thinking about there's 1 million tech startups and 3 out of 4 of them are failing. And even the Startup Genome Project paints an even more dismal picture in saying that only 1 in 12 tech startups succeed. So the failure rate is pretty high. And I want to understand, why is that? So do you have insight on why is it so hard to succeed as a startup in this space?
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of answers for that, is the difficulty, right? I don't think that there's this magic cookbook that everybody can just have and all of a sudden you've got your answer as to, okay, if I do that specific thing, we're going to succeed. There's a couple different facets that are very important for myself, from my previous startup, into 4eyes, et cetera. The first one, for the foremost, perseverance. I think that there's a lot of companies, or a lot of people start up a company, they're passionate about it, they love the product, they know that there's a need, and it's like you run into the first stumbling block, get defeated, and you walk away. And I think that that's systemic. Again, just having that perseverance where nothing is going to stop me, I'm going to bring this thing to market, and I'm going to show people how great this is, right? I think the other thing is, and it's almost like a pet peeve of mine, right? It's when somebody has this vision and they want to start this company and they start to get traction. They get to the point where it's successful enough where they can get some venture cap in. You've convinced other people, you know what, you're going to give me your money for me to go and start this company. And then they get into the hiring process. And they don't really think through that process, right? And they say, well, you know what, that person is an expert in that field, hire them. They may not be a good fit from a personality standpoint. I know for myself, I love the sales and marketing aspect, okay? And it's a typical thing where a lot of guys in sales and marketing, we know what we're doing, we love the stuff, I love the talking.
Right.
And if somebody came up to me and said, well, how do you do the engineering? No, I'm going to hire an engineer for that. They know that better than me. Which kind of leads into another issue that sometimes happens. A lot of great tech startups start with the engineers. They have this great idea, they tinker with it in their garage, they come up with the idea, they come up with the prototype, they convince somebody to give them the money, but they don't look into themselves and find out what they're really good at. So all of a sudden they find themselves with a bit of success, they're the president of the company, they're running operations, they're not doing what they love, which is the engineering.
Right.
And then they try and sell.
Right.
And then they're kind of pigeonholed, and then it becomes difficult. Instead of saying, you know what I'm really good at as an engineer. I'm going to hire the sales guy to go and do the sales, the marketing guy to go, or girl, sorry, the marketing person, to go out and do the marketing and let them excel at what they're good at. And the most difficult thing for a startup, especially when it's your baby, it's your idea, is to actually let the people go and do that.
Yeah.
Right? Because my experience, you get a lot of engineers, et cetera, that are so good at what they do. But then they want to show everybody how good it is by a list of speeds and feeds. And a lot of times the consumer's not going to get it.
Right, and that's what Lisa Swin and the VC was talking about, that even from a VC standpoint, if all she's hearing is from the engineers how great this product is from a technological standpoint, she's trying to assess what is the market for this product, and so she needs to hear that the sales and marketing side of it as well. Correct,
absolutely, and it's a great segue, right? From a VC standpoint, you've also got to have your data. How big is the industry you're going into? What is the capitalization potential? Because at the end of the day, everybody wants to make money. And especially with going into people who, fund VCs, angels, et cetera, the other thing they want to see is that you have a specific plan on an exit strategy. Because a lot of people want to start up a company and think, you know what, I want to be the next Apple. I want to be the next Google. I want to be the next Facebook. They don't necessarily want to exit in 3 to 4 years. So where they're searching for money is completely inappropriate to their goal. So as long as you know at the beginning, okay, I want to be around for 3 to 5 years and then get bought out, go public, or just continue and build up that next mega company, if you plan that from day one, it makes it a lot easier in year 1, year 2, where you typically start to see some bumps in the road that are going to make it difficult for you.
So let's personalize this a little bit and talk about your experience with 4eyes and maybe kind of what were some of the stumbling blocks or things that you kind of learned along the way through this process that you just described.
Great, okay. So one of the things from day one, and people have told me, you've got to be capitalized, you've got to have enough money, you've got to start out, whatever you think you need, it's got to be 4 times bigger.
Wow.
And I probably should have listened to that a lot clearer.
Wow.
So it's a couple companies down the road now, we keep on thinking, you know what, we've got this set, we're going to be good to go. You always need more cash. And it's a very slippery slope. Because if you have a ton of money from day one, you start spending like crazy, and it's probably not invested in the right place. So you want to have a plan where you're going to potentially continue to have investment come in while you're really making sure to appropriately spend the dollars that you do have. The other thing is globalization is a really big mantra for a lot of people, right? There's a lot of really big customers. I was fortunate enough with my previous company, et cetera, where Apple was our biggest customer. And again, it's the same thing. You've got to have that plan from day one. How are you going to reach international markets? You know, we joke around the office all the time. We don't want to be, and I'm going to forget the name of the car company now, the Nova.
Yes.
Or whatever, right?
Right.
Right. Everyone knows about this because in different languages it means no go.
Right.
So you're going to release a car whose name is telling your customer you're not getting anywhere.
Right.
Right. Bad idea. It didn't work out so well for them. So, you know, you really want to make sure, again, with those strategies that you have them set up worldwide for how you're going to go in, because those things always cost money. Now, the good news is, and I guess, you know, this could be like the third point, there are so many companies out there that can help you with this. You can't do everything on your own. And the earlier, you know, for at least me, the earlier I learned in my career to let the people that are really good at this stuff go ahead and do it, the easier my life got. Right. So there's going to be guys that can help you globalize, and I think we're going to talk about it later, distribution models, marketing models, regionalization. What's going to really talk to a customer in North America is vehemently different than what's going to talk to somebody, let's say, in Germany. And then you have to worry about things like legalities. You know, like my favorites, or one of my favorite stories, in Germany, you're not allowed to say it's the best product unless you have like quantifiable data proving that there is nobody out there better than you. It's just, it's against
Can you
their
imagine
laws.
like in the US if we had that kind of law?
I know.
What would the marketers do?
I know.
Right.
So, but it does, it changes all the dynamics, and you've got to be conscious of it from day one.
All right, well, you talked about something before that I want to kind of come back to. You talked about that you knew that you only wanted to have a product that was under $200. You kind of had that price threshold. And I want to ask you about that in the context of all these other factors that you need to weigh in developing your product. So, you know, how important is having the right price point versus having the right brand name versus having the right channel versus actually having the proprietary IP and the patents? Talk to me about, you know, all of those decisions. You know, what are the most important things?
You just asked me a lot of questions. You're going to have to help me through some of these, I think. All right. So from the beginning, so the price point itself.
Yes.
Okay, so there's all kinds of research done that there's these psychological price point barriers, right? So, and I've got tons of data on if I have a $99 product and I drop it to $89, it's not going to make a difference in my volume. I'm not going to sell anymore. There are some horrible price points, like 109 psychologically. Customers don't gravitate towards that.
Right.
You may as well be at 119, get the extra revenue or give more margin to your dealers, et cetera, than be at like that type of price point, right? So knowing that there are certain natural price points that customers respond to, we kind of looked at where we wanted to land. And at least for 4 Eyes in this particular venture, there was a bit of altruism behind it. So I knew that I wanted to be able to provide the customers with a product at a price point that was affordable to, in our opinion, virtually the masses, right? For the most part, $150, $200, you've got a very broad customer base. Once you show them the benefit, they can put out that kind of money. Especially for me, living in Los Angeles, we've got potholes, we've got cars. I mean, we have some of the worst drivers on the planet opening up car doors and you're, you know, biking into them, right?
Right.
So it was really important to us, and it was a difficulty on a marketing standpoint, to allow people to understand that there's a benefit to the product line from a safety standpoint. Unfortunately, safety isn't very sexy. It's not something that's easily marketable.
Right.
Okay? But we had that price point in mind because we wanted to make sure that the majority of people could afford it, have that entry point to market, and I'm a very big fan of fitness. Like I said, I've been an athlete my entire life. It's something that's very dear to me with, you know, some of the obesity in North America that we have. It's a growing concern globally. We wanted to make sure that we're developing products for customers to help them with that, as well as elite athletes, that it's strictly, you know, having it in that particular face and maintaining the aeroflow on the bike, et cetera, you're going to have your optimal performance on race day.
Right, right, okay. So balance the right price point with, let's say, you know, the right channel and the right distribution. Like, how do you think about that?
Okay, great question. So that's something that I think a lot of people, when they're starting a company, neglect until it's too late. So what happens is you've really got to know at the beginning how you're going to get your product to the customer. So for 4 Eyes specifically, we knew it from day one. We're not going to be able to invest in the infrastructure to have huge facilities that are going to drop ship product directly to the customer. The benefit on having that type of model, which some really big companies have, you get all the margin. There's no middleman, right? So you get to control pricing on the street, you have the entire thing, everything goes in your pocket. Very few people can start a company that way and have that kind of liquid equity to be able to build that infrastructure. So what most people do is they want to go through a distribution channel, which then sells to the dealer channel, which then sells to the end customer. a lot of end users hate it when they start learning about the numbers and how much money it actually costs to produce versus what they're paying. Right. But it's a necessity, right? So typically in electronics, most dealers are looking for around like 50 points. So if it's a $200 product, you're going to be getting it to the dealer at, let's say, 100, 110, which means the distributor then has to make their margin. And you've got to work it backwards to, okay, even though you know your MSRP is $200, you as a corporation, you're not making anywhere near that. Which is why online sales is such a critical component for a lot of companies. Right. Because when you do it online, typically, you know, 95% of that does go to your profit to your profit margin.
Okay.
I don't know if that answered the question.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. I think it's, you know, showing that you need to make the right decision. Both the decisions kind of simultaneously, or they need to be one decision, right? Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess the way I can say it is this: for me, there's a top-down, bottoms-up analogy, right? I'll look at it and say, okay. I would love to have our product on the market for $100. More people could afford it, more people could buy it, more people, in my opinion, would be safe and achieving their athletic goals. But the reality is, no one would take me on as a vendor because they're not going to make enough money to make it worth their while to sell it. So it's one of those things, you know, free market, everybody's going to have to make something to make the economy churn. So we kind of looked at top down. I'd love to be at 100, well, it's not going to work. Then let's work bottoms up. I know I have to make a minimum amount of margin to stay in business. Okay, what's that level? Right. What's the minimum the distie has to make? Right. What's that level? What's the minimum my target customer has to make? What's that level? Then you naturally find your MSRP. Right. So a lot of times it's dictated to you.
Okay. Let's talk about branding. And when I say branding in this context, I'm talking about name, logo, kind of visual identity. How did you arrive at your Sport Eyes name? And can you talk about the considerations that need to go into making those decisions?
Sure. So I think on the outset, you've got one of two choices. You're either going to be a company who wants to have brand equity within the consumer realm. So in other words, you're selling to an end user, and they're going to see your name. You know, the other option is OEMing. You've got this great device, and it's a very viable, very profitable business, where, you know, the brand probably has a lesser extent of importance, because you're going to sell to other companies who are then going to sell your product. I think it's safe to say I've been known to be a bit of a control freak when it comes to sales and marketing.
Really?
Yeah. So we knew right away we wanted to be somebody who was customer facing. I want to make sure I'm out there mixing up with the athletes, mixing up with people, and finding out what do they want this to be. So we knew that we were going to have our own brand. And today it is so tough because the web is such a critical component to any company's strategy, marketing strategy. Right. But virtually every name you can think of has been taken by somebody else. You know, you've got these horrible guys called squatters. It's a great business for them. You know, they just buy up every name they can think of, and then you have to go out and buy it from them. Right. Which we were lucky, when we came on Four Eyes, it didn't cost us as much as we feared. But yeah, we had to buy it from somebody else. And for us, it was a bit of tongue-in-cheek. You know, like when I was a kid, I wore glasses. It wasn't exactly a friendly name, but what we want to do is revolutionize that. Because of how we're a visual company, and virtually all the products that we're coming out with have a visual component, that's where we kind of came up with Four Eyes. And it's a bit of a company inside joke what the eyes mean. So, you know, that's where we came up with it. Okay. But for us, it's critical because as a consumer corporation, the brand is incredibly important to us. It dictates whether a product can get launched. Does it live up to the standards that we set? It dictates how we're going to market to our end customer. You know, we have discussions on what does a customer expect from a company named Four Eyes. So, you know, we already know we're not going to be that, and again, for some companies it's critical, but for us, we're not going to be the speeds and feeds. We're going to be a little bit tongue-in-cheek, we're going to be fun, and we want to make it an easy entry point for customers to get into that athletic lifestyle. So, you know, for us, that's where we came up with the name.
Right, okay. So it sounds like your brand name and this image that you're trying to create is very important, but how important is that relative to the actual product and technology? Like if you have, this is probably an impossible question, but I'll ask anyway, if you have $1 to spend, are you going to spend it on your brand, or are you going to spend it on your product and technology?
That is an impossible question to ask. But I think the reason it's a difficult question to answer is because it really depends where you are in the life cycle of your company and the life cycle of the product itself. And it's so tough to come up with the right analogy to explain, but it's like, okay, if I really had $1 to sell, where am I right now? Do I really need that next innovative product? Then it's going to go to the engineers if my sales cycle is doing really well. If I'm in true startup portion of the company, like, we've got a new product out now, well, it's going to go to marketing. But then you have to ask what type of marketing. What's the customer going to gravitate towards the most? Endorsements of professional athletes. For a lot of companies, that's huge.
Yeah.
Why? Because they have the voice that people listen to. If you've got that one guy out there saying, I just won a gold medal, and it's because of Sport Eyes, people are going to be like, oh, now I have to go get it. And it becomes this aspirational marketing concept where people aspire to be like that athlete. If you've got something which is a little more consumer basic, then it's going to be print media. Just get the word out there if nobody really knows who you are.
Right.
So where that $1 is going to go, that's typically a gut check.
Yeah,
now the thing to get ready, sorry.
I was going to say, it sounds like it really depends on where you are in the life cycle of your product.
But the one thing I can promise, every division of the company is going to want that $1,
yeah.
and they're all going to justify why they deserve that $1.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about, you started going in a little bit into the specific marketing, and I wanted to ask about how marketing has changed, and what are some of the approaches that you've taken to marketing that have been particularly effective, and what are some things that you've done that haven't turned out so well?
Oh, we always talk about the ones that don't turn out. I hate those. So I think the ones that work well for me, right, it's word of mouth. At the end of the day, you want to get that cycle churning and word of mouth.
So how do you get that word of mouth?
Build the best product you can. Don't compromise. Now again, I want to try and make this as relevant for everyone as I can. There are going to be companies where it's like, you know what, there's a mousetrap that exists. We're going to build a better mousetrap. And then the marketing approach is completely different. You still want to build the best product you can, but sometimes it's like, you know what, I want it to be as inexpensive as I can. It may not have all the bells and whistles, but it's definitely going to help more people get into that market. For us specifically, we believe we're generating an entire new category, right? No one's really doing it the way we're doing. No one has the products we have. No one's trying to leverage all this technology and combine it together. So for us, it's all word of mouth. And right now we're seeing a huge amount of growth, specifically because of one guy talked to the other guy. And we've got a bit of a benefit. People like blinky lights. So whenever I'm out there on a bike and I've got my cycling kit on and they see this thing and they hear it talking to me.
Cool.
Exactly, like, what is that thing? And
right.
I always make sure you're always there to market because, again, person-to-person communication is critical. I always carry a stack of my business cards and I'll give them out to people. And, sometimes it's fun because I've got like a little coupon code where I'll give them 10%, whatever, on the website. So stuff like that really, really works well. And then you build a critical mass. So that's from an experience standpoint of somebody who's actually used it. I still think print media is relevant. I think it's incredibly relevant because if you've got no equity whatsoever, it's almost that subliminal thing of people see the brand, people see the logo, people see the name over and over again. Then the next time they see it in the store, they're going to have a familiarity with it. They're going to be comfortable with it. So it's kind of like, what's the end goal? How do you get them to take the money out of their pocket and actually put it down to buy this product? And then, of course, print media has evolved. And now you're getting into the combination of online media, right?
Yes.
Like everyone's experimenting with how are they going to monetize and make money on Facebook. But Facebook is actually brilliant in the sense, I have one of my favorite things on Facebook is triathlon. I only get triathlon advertising. So as a corporation, if you can pinpoint that target audience that well, it's a great way to get to them and give them the message, but only on stuff they want to see.
Right.
So, that's worked out really well. Stuff that hasn't worked well, the wrong ad to the wrong customer. Just buying into, well, this publication has 400,000 people that we reach, and it's completely irrelevant to the type of product that you're selling. So I think you've got to be really, really careful on the demographics of the media that you're going towards. So for example, if it was a demographic where traditionally the reader is of an older generation type thing, I'm not going to go out with a really clever, cutesy ad campaign.
Right.
It's not something they're going to gravitate towards, right? I'm not going to go out to, if I'm trying to target the 50-plus crowd, I'm not going to go and target them with, well, you're going to shave 15 minutes off of your personal best, because chances are in their athletic style, they're a little past that, and maybe their goal is just to lose weight.
Right.
Okay. If I'm going into, for us specifically, Triathlon Magazine, great demographic for us. We're going to go towards, you're going to be safer, and you are going to be way faster, right? So that'll work. But we've run ads that didn't really respond well at all.
Well, and actually that brings me to a question I want to ask, but I want to give the folks in the audience an opportunity to ask questions and kind of give you some time to think about those questions. So while I ask Ian this last question of mine, go ahead and think about what you want to ask him. And so I did want to talk about targeting and this, and just how do you determine, who is your target market, and how do you define them, and how do you really get to know them as a specific target segment?
That's great. So I think bracketing your customer base is critical. So, and even internally from a cultural standpoint, what you call your targets is just as critical. So, we've really broken it out. So, of course, we've got our pro athlete who's a target. We've got our aspirational customer who's a target. We've got our, what we call a novice. And again, there's other words that could be used. But, when you bracket and you start designing product, developing product, and marketing and selling product to those specific brackets, it makes it that much easier to laser focus on what that messaging is going to look like. Mm-hmm. So again, for triathlon, just a couple quick stats. Like triathlon's one of the largest growing individual events worldwide. So you've got more individuals participating in triathletes, and the exponential growth is larger than any other sport. Mm-hmm. They've got a higher disposable income than any other sport. And the age that they're looking for is typically, I think it's late 20s to mid 30s, mm-hmm. even into the 40s and 50s. So once we had those guys bracketed and we started going to the publications where we knew how to reach them, mm-hmm. the entry point to market became that much easier. And the other thing for us is just making sure that it's fun.
Right.
Right. You want to make sure that you're passionate about who you're marketing to. Mm-hmm. And when you have, and again, this goes back to hiring, right? Because there's certain guys that are customer facing in the team and there's certain guys that just don't do it. The research and the development of being out there and cycling with them, running with them, training with them, really getting inside of the mindset of the customer, to an extent, it gets to be part of the organic nature of your corporation itself. It becomes part of the culture, and then it almost becomes second nature.
Great, great. What questions do you all have for Ian?
Oh, no.
I had a question. What do you think on Kickstarter or crowdsourcing as a way to kind of validate and pre-sell a niche product?
That's a tough one. All right.
We only ask tough questions here.
I know. You guys are really good at this. You've also got the best-looking audience. All right. Levity? No? Okay.
I was going to say, you all look really good for having been here all day, so good job.
Kickstarter has some unbelievable success stories. I mean, there's a couple companies I think raised upwards of $10 million to get off the ground. And I think that Kickstarter's kind of, it had its initial offering, which was great, and people jumped all over it. And it's really beneficial because from day one whether or not your product, relatively speaking, if you've got a good model for success on the product based on how you marketed to Kickstarter customers, to see if they responded to give you money. And there's a lot of things I would say that if you put something up on Kickstarter and it's not working, you're not getting a response, you've either got to relook at the marketing or relook at the project itself. So it's invaluable because the other thing is you're not giving up any of your company. So where you do go with investment firms, et cetera, who have a huge benefit because they have this massive amount of knowledge, they can go in and help you getting to market with marketing, with distribution, with development, et cetera. One of the things that Kickstarter gives you is all the money's yours. Now, where I get really, really worried about Kickstarter is there are statistics on how many people went into Kickstarter and raised the money, but then weren't able to deliver. Mm-hmm. So you could be this brand new company with the greatest idea in the world who raises a ton of money at Kickstarter, and let's say your goal was to raise $400,000, and that's going to get you to market. Some stuff happens, maybe there's legal issues, maybe there's production issues, maybe you needed to launch in October, but the manufacturer you went with said, sorry, I've got customers way bigger, I can't deliver you your product until February. You just left such a bad taste in the mouth of all the people that invested in you on Kickstarter. You may never get that back. They may be so slighted that it's almost impossible to get their trust back on the next round. So,
and these people are Mavens. They're the ones who are like spreading the word online and social media. So they're the last people that you really want to disappoint.
They've got a huge voice because they're the early adopters. They're the first guys that are really going to build your brand in the community. Mm-hmm. And if your first venture into the consumer is, I'm going to deliver for Christmas, and I only deliver for summer the next season, you've got a really large hill to climb to try and gain the trust back of the customer. Mm-hmm. So I think it's great if done responsibly and with a very specific plan on how you're going to market yourself on Kickstarter.
Cool. Other questions? All right. Well, that's okay. I have two more questions. One is just generally, I would love to hear your point of view on what new products or technologies do you expect are going to go big? You know, are there things out there, and maybe, I don't know if you necessarily need to name specific products or brands, but just kind of like, you know, what do you think is the next big thing out there?
You mean fitness and related?
Yes,
Okay, great. So, and fitness. So, it's something that we're striving for, right? I think it's going to be simplification, believe it or not. So, there is so much data. And my feeling is that companies are striving to deliver more data to the athlete, more data to the consumer. And you've got this greatest stuff, but then the consumer gets lost in the data. Like I used to joke around before I became familiar with it, I need a coach for my coach to interpret all my data when I'm training, right? And I think that we've reached a point where there's such an explosion of health and fitness that to me the next step to bump it up to that next level is going to be to simplify everything. So, you know, it's kind of like for us, you know, I can bore you with, you know, certain heart rate zones. What's a zone 1? What's a zone 3? What's a zone 5, right? And when I'm out there running, I'm like, well, wait a minute. Today I've got a zone 3 workout with 4 times 10-minute intervals, and I have to hold them at this specific heart rate, and I get out on the bike or the run, and I'm like, wait, what was my heart rate zone?
Wow.
I can't remember.
Yeah.
So, you know, our approach was, okay, make it easy. I'm either below, I'm above. Once I'm in green, great, I'm doing the right thing. I get to zone out, concentrate on the workout, and simplify. And there's all kinds of great technology. So I think that one of the next explosions for the next generation is going to be, and you're starting to see the infancy of it now, is these companies say, okay, great, we've got the technology where we need it. Let's consolidate it, simplify it, and deliver it in a much more consumable package to the end user.
So simplification actually becomes your value proposition.
Yeah,
right?
like I'll throw out one little anecdote, right? Because it amazes me that in health and fitness, people don't know some of the basic levels, right? And that's one of the things we really want to educate. As a manly man, I used to think that if I went out there and I ran as hard as I could for 10 minutes, I was going to lose weight. And then if I could go 11 minutes the next day, I was going to lose more weight, which is completely wrong, because then you're burning glycogen. And everyone thinks as long as I sweat and breathe as hard as possible, then I'm, you know, going to be fit. And it's amazing to us when we started doing the research that people don't realize that, like for me right now in my cycle, I'm in my weight loss zone, right? So I'm trying to lose weight right now. And I have to go out and do nice, long, easy rides at a very low heart rate, because then I'm burning fat stores as opposed to my glycogen stores, and that's how I'm going to lose my weight. And that was something I only learned when we started these companies. I had no idea. So getting that across to people that, you know, fitness can be easy. We can give you the data in a very digestible manner, and you're going to have fun doing it. That, to me, is the next big explosion in this industry.
Cool. All right. Last question. What advice do you have for aspiring entrepreneurs in digital health and fitness? If someone said, what is the one thing I need to know, what would you say?
Only one? Can I give a few?
You can give 3.
Okay. So the first one I'm going to steal because it's in my head, and I love this quote, right? For any entrepreneur, and I'm stealing this from Richard Branson. So he has this quote that God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. And what he was getting at was, you never know where the next great idea is going to come from. Listen to your team, listen to your customers, listen to people out there who probably know more than you do in very specific areas of the market, and hear what they have to say. Because if you're doing more of the talking, you're not learning, and you're doing yourself a huge discredit. And as somebody who likes to talk, it's something I'm taking on. And I've learned a lot from it, and I've actually noticed huge results from that, right? Because again, from the most junior person in your organization, they're the ones that haven't been jaded by the past, and they haven't been, you know, stuck in the mire, et cetera. You can learn a lot from them from a brand new, fresh perspective of, you know what, I don't like the word you're using. Well, all the executives agreed on it. Well, you know, if you actually ask and you listen, you can learn so much about your own organization, what's working, what's not working, and, you know, their opinions, et cetera. You know, the second biggest thing, just do it. And I don't need that from the Nike sense. That was unintentional. But, you know, Alan Sorkin, again, who's like a hero of mine from a writing standpoint, you know, he got up there and he's like, you know, people always ask me, what is it about writing? It's the same thing. What is it about starting a company? There's only one major difference between you and all the other successful companies. They went out there and they did it. That's all it takes. You just have to get on a path, have a plan, stay true to yourself and to the plan, and just follow through with it. And I think, you know, that makes such a big difference, because especially with the way the economy is going, to me, especially North America, worldwide, the way the economy is going to go back to flourishing is people starting these companies, getting their products to market, being open to how those companies can evolve, grow, and work together. And I think that we haven't even seen the best of it yet in North America and the rest of the world. I think that the best is yet to come. There's a huge potential, and it's almost like we're being pushed into it because you're starting to see all these companies grow, flourish, and learn from each other.
Right. Cool. Did you say there were 3 or just 2?
Oh, you know what? I think I did. The last thing for me is be open to suggestions, but don't compromise. I think they were saying it on the panel before. Just because you can save 20 cents here, 30 cents there, make sure that at the end of the day, when you're trying to save money, you're still delivering the best possible product for your model to the end user, because it's going to make a huge difference down the road. I look at companies like Apple, which again, they're the darling of the economy right now. Their stock's never been higher and they're doing so great. They never compromised on anything. Mm-hmm. They only took on 5 things. Even though they're huge today, they still only take on 5 projects at a time. You can work on 5 things. Other than that, you're diluting yourself. And they've got patents on products that you can start $30, $100 million companies off of, right? But one of the things that I really admire is no matter what happens, they don't compromise. Recently in the news, there's been a lot of talk about a couple things they compromised on. They're not going to do that again, right? They know what made them successful and they're going to stick with it. And it's always a matter of making sure that you don't compromise. And I guess, especially here because it's relevant, choosing the right technology partners. Mm-hmm. Like for us, we knew right away, Ant Plus, as an athlete, I knew that they were just such a great company and everything just worked together. We knew how to choose the right partners. Mm-hmm. And it's not always going to be, well, I can save 50 cents here and give myself an extra 10, Don't do it. Just stick to the vision. Make sure that when you release that product to the customer, it's something you yourself would pay that amount of money for. And that's probably one of the best litmus tests I can give you.
Cool. Ian, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Please
Hopefully that was
join me in
helpful.
thanking him.